Yeah. Good morning. Good day, Zach. How are you?
Howdy doody.
It's good
How's
to
it
see
going?
you.
Wonderful to
Life
see
is,
you.
yeah, life is good. Life is great.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's wonderful to hear that. You know, we got this crazy world going on right now. Drones are delivering medicine, maybe stuff from Wally World. I haven't seen any of those in action though yet, but I have driven past the Walmart that has a drone up thing there. I didn't see anything happen, but I'm ready and waiting in anticipation to see it. Actually, I was driving down the road a couple weeks ago and I saw like 6 drones going over and I thought it was it. And I was like,
no
oh,
kidding.
look. But it wasn't. It was just random drones.
Wow.
Who knows what they were doing. But they were pretty low. Maybe they were. Honestly, maybe they were the Walmart ones. I couldn't really tell. They're bigger than I thought. I remember a couple weeks ago, told you, did you send me that video? Maybe it was a week ago, 2 video. How they actually bring down the package was not how I was anticipating it happen. I was thinking homeboy was just going to come float all the way down, roll down, drop the package, just like so it's more like the claw, you know, from Toy Story that's going down, pulling that sucker up and down.
Yeah,
what's
I think
the weight limit on those? Oh, because it was the Chick-fil-A thing that.
Oh, right. Yeah. Weight thing. I don't know. 15 pounds.
No one answered my question, though. I'm disappointed with the Innovate Hampton Roads LinkedIn response team because I need to know if this now means that I can get my Chick-fil-A on Sundays.
Oh, I did. I missed that comment, Zach, but I would have to venture and say no.
Oh. But it is cool that tech is being created here. It's interesting. You know, they pivoted, right? They started originally doing disaster drone relief, basically aerials, to figure out where things were for them to transition into actual delivery, last mile of stuff, which is obviously the biggest barrier.
And they still do the other things.
Okay.
But they just, man, this is just such a innovative pivot. That it's fun for folks to talk about, living in the future.
Yeah, and you drove by the office the other day when you went to Topgolf for the first time. So you got to see that little marquee. So that's cool. Today's guest I've never met before until, 17 minutes ago. And you said I'm the last person in Hampton Roads that he's met. Is that true?
I think that might be the case.
Is that true, Bob? There's no one else left in the old region?
I met a few this morning, so we may be closing in on the total.
But
exciting times.
Well, welcome Bob McKenna to the show. Representing
great to be here.
Yeah, representing the Virginia Peninsula Chamber. It's kind of new branding.
Yeah.
No longer
of commerce.
Yeah. Of commerce. Did you know that, Zach?
The community college stole our acronym, so we had to.
How did that work? Did you agree upon that beforehand, or was it?
So interestingly, my predecessor at the chamber, Mike Coons, who you know well, was on the board.
That's right.
Board of directors at the Thomas Nelson Community College, and he called and gave us a heads up. But we had already decided that we were going to rebrand, and a lot of chambers around the country have taken off of commerce. For whatever reason, maybe because we live in a soundbite world now, and that was just too much for people to swallow.
Tongue twister.
Yeah, right. It was so every time I had to introduce myself, it was, Virginia Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and say that 3 or 4 times, and you get twisted. But Virginia Peninsula Chamber just seemed to work better, and the timing was perfect, and it gave me material for a joke to give Dr. Brandon a hard time and her team over at the community college, but we didn't get any extra money out of them. So it wasn't fiscally beneficial to us.
Did you have the vpcc.com domain?
We have .org, and we still do.
Well, there
Yeah,
you
so
go. You can
so
sell
our-
that
we
back to
haven't
them
changed our-
sell it back to them for $5 million.
$20 million.
Well,
You think they got that much? So
I don't know.
So
If-
I think a lot.
maybe a little extra in the annual partnership.
Well, who knows? I think historically businesses, maybe the community at large, they really don't understand what a chamber of commerce does and why they should be associated with it. Now taking of commerce off, can you just like run us through what a chamber does, why someone should care, and then the of commerce aspect? Do we just not care about money anymore? Like where do we care? Like what's the whole like origins of a chamber and stuff like that?
So chambers historically are business organizations that advocate for the economy, for business success, right? How to make businesses successful in the region, which kind of is like the rising tide that lifts all boats, right? If small businesses are successful and if major industries are successful, then that's mutually beneficial. And the chamber has always been the connection point and the advocate for businesses, and the person who brings together everybody on events at which they can network and they can exchange information, and then they can collaborate to help improve the community and to make their own businesses successful. So the chamber is kind of the meeting point and the connector, and that's kind of always how it's been. We have in recent years we've started working with the nonprofit community a little bit more, and I had some questions early on when I first got to the chambers. You're spending a lot of time working with nonprofits. How do the private businesses, how does industry feel about that? And my point to them was, well, nonprofits are businesses also, right? And they also have boards of directors who represent the larger companies. So one of the ways that I have met everybody on the peninsula that I need to meet is by working with the nonprofits and meeting their boards. But the third point about nonprofits is that that's where the community begins. And if our charter is to work with community partners to help create conditions that are conducive to economic growth, then part of that is ensuring that we live in a good community, and part of that is the work that the nonprofits do. And then certainly a big part of it is working with major industry from the area and then helping small businesses thrive and grow. So it's kind of a wide-ranging job, right? There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot that can be done. I have a very small staff, so we really rely on community partners like Tim. I mean, Tim has been great. We've worked with him on a number of things, but our staff is 3 full-time people and 3 part-time people. So in order to do anything really effective and efficient, we have to find good community partners. So if in one word, I would say we're the connector.
And then you have what, four other C's, 5 other C's? I don't know, how many C's are you up to now? The 7 sailing the 7 C's with Bob McKenna.
And that really should, because I have that Navy background, I probably should have just done the 7 C's, but my board always wants to get to 3, and the board, not my board. But we have 5, and then if we do those 5 successfully and do them well, then there's a 6th. But I always say 5 C's, and the 5 C's are: we are a connector of people and organizations. We are a convener of initiatives and meetings. And that's kind of to get rid of that stovepipe attitude of like 10 different organizations working on the same thing, but never actually getting together and working on it together. So we're the convener of those organizations. We're a collaborator, which kind of falls into the convener thing, but we have to collaborate, as I said before, because we have a small staff, and in order to get big things done, we have to find partners. But also we represent the peninsula in any regional initiatives, so that's how we collaborate. We're a conduit. We're a conduit of important information, and we do that via our newsletter and via different events where we bring in speakers who are talking about important things to the business community. We also have that small business series, Tim, that you're familiar with, that provides information to people who are interested in starting or growing their business. And then we're a champion of the great assets of the peninsula. And the way we do that is through events, but also through our newsletter. But it's putting information out about some of the great assets that we have on the peninsula that should drive greater economic growth. So, for instance, yesterday we did a spotlight on the Peninsula event at Hampton University. So a lot of people, there was 50 to 60 people that showed up for the event. The new university president addressed the group, General Williams, Darrell Williams. And I asked the crowd how many of them had ever been in that Hampton University Museum, which is the largest Black history museum in the United States. And probably 10% of the people in the room had been in the museum before. So we take people once a month. We take them to different places that they may know about, but they've never seen. And the perspective is driven from an economic growth, economic development perspective. But the intent is to create ambassadors for the great assets we have, so they'll go back to their family and friends and fellow employees or whatever and say, "Hey, you got to check this out." And that's in order to drive optimism and a positive attitude about the peninsula. So every once in a while, people think that we're the redheaded stepchild, right? We're not Virginia Beach. We're not rich. Is that politically incorrect, Zach?
I don't know. I don't care.
If you're a redhead, I guess it is. But we're not the redheaded stepchild. Richmond.
Everything
Richmond
offends everything offends.
Yeah, I know.
We support free speech on this platform. So
very good.
Fire away.
I'm a big proponent of free speech, and in fact, I might be called a First Amendment absolutist. But Richmond is the capital. Virginia Beach is like the tourism hub, right? Everybody wants to go to the beach. What's on the peninsula? We're just in the middle. Well, the peninsula has a Department of Energy lab that was just awarded the High Performance Data Facility, which is going to not only inject 500 million into our economy, but it's going to have high-paying jobs associated with it, and it's going to be a place where people from around the world come to study and do research and to tap into this supercomputer. We have the largest industrial employer in the state that also happens to be the only place in the world that builds nuclear aircraft carriers. Right here in our backyard, right? Literally in our backyard. We have NASA, Langley Research Center. We have, Fortune 500 companies. We have great tourism. We have 3 great universities and a community college. So we have so many great gifts from an economic growth perspective that I think it's part of our job is to convince the people that this is a great place to live. And then they can maybe convince their kids to come back here after they graduate from NC State or UVA or Virginia Tech or James Madison, right? And then we can convince the ones who came here to go to CNU and Hampton and William and Mary that this is a great place to stay and work and live. So we're marketing the area.
You notice you didn't say Virginia Tech there, so thank you, Bob.
I did. So sorry. I should have said Virginia Tech because that's where my youngest son is, the senior.
We don't mention that school in this show.
Go Hokies.
But it is interesting when you talk to the student body at Christopher Newport University. A vast majority, I mean, probably upwards to 80% of them are from Northern Virginia.
Yeah,
and so
or
locally,
Richmond, right?
Yeah. So it's always amazes me how many people will come down to Newport News to go to CNU, whereas everyone here locally, like the thought of them going to CNU it's just a non-starter.
Right.
I get you want to get away from home, you want to be close to your parents, but it's interesting to me the dynamic of that student body, and the campus is gorgeous.
So let me comment on that, Tim. So I live a mile from Christopher Newport University. My kids all grew up going past CNU to go to grade school, middle school, high school. One of them went to CNU, but that one went away to the Navy for 4 years. So he already went away. And then he came back and went to CNU. And now he's in the Army. But the other 3, when I said to them, you should check out Christopher Newport University, their attitude was, I got to go away. So I think that's why we have the Northern Virginia kids, because kids are the same everywhere. They need to get away from their parents, spread the wings a little bit. So our goal should be not only the boomerangs, getting them to come back, but getting those kids that have already left home and say, hey, this is a great place for you to settle and raise a family and start a career. There's also not a lot of schools. There's not a lot of schools in Northern Virginia. Right. Well, and it's a very expensive area to live, right? Even as a college student, in George Mason or George Washington or one of those places. Yeah. I think it's a lot more expensive Now there's more job opportunities maybe, but who wants to be in the Beltway? I did a tour up there. I don't want to go back.
I lived
So I
there
think-
for 20 something years. Haven't been back since.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like there's a big circle around the DC area, and I try to avoid it anytime I'm going.
Well, and that circle continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
I mean, it's just it's before you would get to Stafford going south, and you were kind of like through the traffic, and now you're still in the thick of it.
Sometimes that's where you hit it, right?
Right.
You hit as soon as those hills start, you're backed up. So tomorrow I'm driving to Reading, Pennsylvania, to watch the Hokies that Zach didn't want me to talk about play rugby for the National Club Championship semifinals. And I said to my wife, I said, well, it'll take us 6 hours to get there without traffic, but it'll probably take us 9 because we're going to have to go on a Friday afternoon kind of around DC somehow. And then Baltimore and Philadelphia too.
Yeah.
How do you?
No, go ahead. I'm talking about traffic. We're not going to fix it.
I have lived here. Let me just give you some backstory about me. Like quick 30-second pitch. Grew up in Northern Virginia. Went to West Virginia University. Went back home for that summer, and then applied to a bunch of jobs, and then ended up coming down here in 2007 to work in TV. That was supposed to be a quick 1 or 2 year to go somewhere else. I ended up during that time meeting a girl, and I've stayed there since, right? Or stayed here since. I've heard this ever since I got into the business thing, that like convincing kids or convincing people that this area is nice is this thing that this area wants to do. Honestly, if we're still talking about that 15, 16 years later, it seems like maybe we're not doing a good job of convincing people to do that. So like, but I think all of us live here. We agree that it's a nice place. What isn't working in this thing to try to convince the people who live here or their kids that this is a thing that maybe you should stay with? Because a lot of people from a lot of different places will come down. You got a lot of people from New York that come down here. A lot of people from Northern Virginia do come back down here. A lot of people do live here their entire lives. Like, is it just like this? What is it? The Napoleon effect, that where we just don't believe or whatever?
Right.
Like, I don't know. It just seems like it's kind of like regionalism. It's kind of like you're just kind of saying the same things for the last 2 decades, and that's only since I've been involved. It's like
I want to attack a second part to that question, Bob.
All right.
When you're active duty Navy and you find out that you get an assignment to Norfolk, is that generally a good thing, or is that like not perceived as a good thing?
So, okay, that's a good question. My first tour in the Navy was in Jacksonville at Mayport Naval Station. And then that ship transferred to Philadelphia, which, I mean, no offense to the Philadelphia people out there, but because my family's from Philadelphia, but that's kind of the last place I wanted to be. So my next set of orders, and then I went to Jacksonville again. And Jacksonville is a wonderful place. It's where I got married. My parents lived. Great beaches, just a great community. But then I went to Newport, Rhode Island, which is another great place. And then I asked for orders to come to Virginia Beach, to Little Creek specifically. So I didn't see anything negative about it. And because it's such a hub for the Navy, right? I mean, everybody eventually, if they're on the East Coast, eventually passes through Norfolk and Virginia Beach. So there may be some people who have a bad idea in their head about this area, but I never did. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I would say no, because it's seen as a Navy hub, and sailors need to be here, and officers need to be here if they're going to make a career of it. And then when you get here, you just realize that there's so much good going on. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but
yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, I know from my point of view, in the Air Force, I had to pull as much weight as I could to get to Langley. I mean, like I cashed in all my chips with 2 4-star generals to get here. And then once we got here, we weren't leaving because we fell in love with the area.
So the other services are different too, right, Tim? Like the Army and the Air Force, like Air Force has a base in Minot, North Dakota, right?
I was in Grand Forks for 3.5 years.
Yeah. So
I know all about it.
This is seen as a big step up from that.
100%.
The Navy has San Diego and the Pacific Northwest and Jacksonville, Florida, and Newport, Rhode Island, and places like that. And so maybe compared to those different places, which are a little bit, maybe have a more positive connotation to them, maybe Norfolk is seen as second best or third best or something like that. But I just never saw it like that. I mean, I've lived all over the place, even growing up. And every place that I've ever lived, I found the positives from. But so just take it a step further. When I retired from the Navy in 2011, I was living on the river, on the St. Johns River, on the base at Naval Air Station Jacksonville. And I could have stayed living on the river after I retired. And I chose to come back to Hampton Roads and to Newport News specifically. So anytime somebody goes, oh, all the transitioning service members just want to get out of here, I say, well, my story is exactly the opposite. I was somewhere else and I wanted to get back here. And part of that was I had a job offer here. Part of it was I owned a house here. Part of it was that 2 of my kids had graduated from high school here and the other 2 wanted to go to the same high school. But there was a lot attractive about this area to me, and there still is. So I find, part of my charter as the president of the Peninsula Chamber is to get out and be positive and talk to people about the great gifts here. And that's transitioning service members, most of whom leave. And it's college students at CNU and Hampton and William and Mary, and it's high school kids who I usually try to talk them into going to work at the shipyard or going into the military if they're undecided about what they want to do. But I'm always selling this area because I truly believe in it.
I don't think it's uncommon for people to want to leave home. That aspect of it,
right.
There's definitely that. But the negative aspect, I mean, we're still talking about it, right? People are like, oh, there's something the matter with this area. Even like leaders, right? Like they talk about that.
Yeah.
And so they talk about it in like a negative way. And like, it's almost like their vernacular is continuing this conversation that needs to actually be 180, be flip-flopped, to be like, hey, like this is this thing. Like, do you feel it? Like this is this thing in there that's like, hey, maybe it is a little bit stronger than you're giving it. Like you're buying into this thing. Like, is regionalism really that are we really off on regionalism, or are we just, continuing this conversation that is so ridiculous? It's just like, get over it. Like to me, regionalism is the stupidest thing in the world. Just do it together. Just work on things. Never talk about it. You continue to have this conversation that is just it's just a waste of time, right? But people talk about it. I was on a conversation with someone earlier today, and they're like, "Oh, we're working on regionalism." I'm like, "There's nothing to work on. Just stop talking about it. Do things, and that doesn't become the conversation." Like sometimes, like you'll get big media press, and that's what the people will talk about is, "Oh yeah, we're trying to fix the regionalism." It's like you have an opportunity to tell the world what you're doing, and you're focused on this like minor little thing down here. Like hire a publicist to tell you what to say. Like, it just seems comical.
No, you're absolutely right. So Tim, you were at that last Rising Tide event, and I came out of that event, was talking to Howard Hagee, who's the president and CEO of the Mariners Museum, and I asked him what he thought, and he said, "I love the positive spin," and he said, "I think regional leaders or peninsula leaders need to always point out the positives that are going on. Right? There's enough false narrative out there that, or just narrative in general. It may be false or it may be not false, but you talk about public safety and you talk about the public schools and everything. There's enough people talking about the negatives of all that kind of stuff that sometimes we can work behind the scenes on that stuff. But when we get in public, we have to talk about the positives too, and we have to point out the things that I pointed out earlier. We've got 25,000 employees at the largest industrial employer in the state. We've got a Department of Energy lab. We have NASA. We have great universities. We have good entertainment. We have great geography. All those things that some people take for granted. Somebody has to be standing up at a podium and saying, we have great things going on in this community. We need to capitalize on those great things. Do we have weaknesses? Sure, we have weaknesses. And we have to mitigate those or make them into strengths. But let's talk about the strengths sometimes too.
Right.
But here's the thing about that. People don't know that people might not know that information. They just might be like thinking, oh, well, all I know is what these people are telling me. But then when we just jump on board with stuff like that and don't actually bring out a lot of positives out there, it's like spin the narrative the way that you want it to. I don't mean that in like a negative way. I mean, like, tell the story that you want to, let people know, present to the world what you know and how you see it, and present that. And that's a monumental thing, a monumental concept that I think a lot of people, not just here, but globally, don't do. They talk about like the super technical, or, oh, this is what I'm seeing from this perspective, but they don't actually share kind of this is really where we are. There's 100.
Right.
I remember we used to do this thing called the State of the Startup Community Address. Tim had been there. And one of the things that we found is there's 100, or at least at the time in like 2015, 2016, 112,000 active students in this region. That's a crap ton. Why aren't we capitalizing on that? That's a huge opportunity. You said 4 or 5 Fortune 500s. Huge opportunity. You got one of the greatest amusement parks in the world. You got one of the longest beaches in Virginia Beach. You got all the largest Navy base in the world. You got the logistics hub. You got the beer capital of the Mid-Atlantic. A lot of great things. And those are just things that I could think of, off the top of my head. Spin that,
Yes.
not some of this other stuff. So
You're singing off my sheet of music, Zach. That's fantastic. And I point, Tim, you see me all the time. I point it out all the time. So can I tell my Charleston story real quick, Tim?
Ooh.
You've heard of it.
Yeah.
So we went on a regional leadership exchange back in May, Zach, to Charleston, sponsored by the Hampton Roads Chamber, and took about 70 business leaders down there. And we go every year to a different place to kind of learn about what makes them successful. Like, so we've been to Denver and Raleigh, Durham, and this past year we went to Charleston. And after talking to a series of leaders in Charleston, I kind of formulated this narrative in my head about what I heard and what my response to it would be. But what I heard was, well, in Charleston, here's what's making us work. We have military presence. And I said, you have nothing compared to what Hampton Roads has, right? 5 services, 7 or 8 bases, largest Navy base in the world, Air Combat Command, TRADOC, highest concentration of U.S. Coast Guard personnel in the United States. So Charleston pales in comparison. And then they said, well, we have advanced manufacturing. I said, well, what do you make? And they said, well, we make Volvo wagons and Mercedes Sprinter vans. And I said, well, we make nuclear carriers and nuclear subs. So they pale in comparison once again. And then they said something like, well, we're surrounded by water. And I said, can I explain to you what Hampton Roads means and how many miles of coastline we have, both rivers and bay and actually ocean? And then they said, well, we have history. And I said, welcome to the birthplace of America in Yorktown and Colonial Williamsburg and Jamestown and Point Comfort. So on every count, we had better assets than they have. But so why are they working so well? Well, they're working so well because they have, first of all, and we're not going to do this, but they call themselves Metropolitan Charleston, right? So all the surrounding areas call themselves Charleston. So that's storytelling, right? And I think the bottom line is they tell their story a whole lot better than we do. And they market their area and they say, hey, wedding parties, come down and have your wedding parties down here and come down on your vacation and walk our cobblestone streets and go to our great restaurants. We need to tell our story better because we have a great story. It's not the same story as Charleston, but in a lot of ways, it's better than Charleston. In most, Charleston's too expensive for me. I love the place, but I like living here. This is a better place to live, work, and play.
They also have the hit Bravo show Southern Charm. Forgot to mention that.
That they do.
Very good. I've never watched it, believe it or not.
Oh, nothing like
Shep.
Bravo TV.
Yeah.
So you said we're not going to do this, but they did it. So why not call it Metro? The Metropolitan.
Charleston?
Yeah, you said that's what they do.
Right.
And here,
Right.
my guess is, I don't know where you guys are on that, but like Metropolitan, whatever, insert whatever city name here. You don't like that? That's just not going to happen. Like,
I just don't think it's realistic to think it's ever going to happen. So you got what the 7 cities. Do you think Hampton and Newport News are going to agree to call it Norfolk, or Virginia Beach? Do you think they're going to agree to call it Norfolk?
even though that's what the rest of the world calls it?
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, I just don't. I think there's too many personalities, too much money, too many people who are always going to say no. We would love to be called the major Norfolk metropolitan area or whatever, but I don't think people in the surrounding places are going to agree to that, right? or hey, Bobby Dyer would love to call it Virginia Beach, but Kenny Alexander and other mayors around the Hampton Roads area are not going to agree to call it Virginia Beach. I just think there's too many fairly good sized cities who would not agree to call themselves by the name of another city, even in the name of helping our economy grow.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough.
It's not.
Well,
it's
I agree with that too. I agree with that too.
it's tough because of human nature.
Right.
I think I don't know that we'll ever get past it. You know, we had this regional branding initiative, 5 years ago now.
Has it been that long? Wow.
It was before the pandemic. So it was,
Oh, that's right.
so it'll be 5 years this spring that we started that regional branding initiative. And we went through all kinds of surveys, right? Surveys of the residents, surveys of people who had come here in the last 5 years to go to the beaches or for tourism purposes, site selection consultants from outside the area, did all kinds of surveys and said, what should we call the area? And I think it was kind of a mixed bag, but I think probably the majority of people decided from all surveys, I mean, if you put them all together, said keep it Hampton Roads, right? There were certain pockets who said coastal Virginia would work best, and I think most of those people were in Virginia Beach or on the south side, you know, in the more coastal area. And then some people, old school, really wanted to call it Tidewater because that's what they've always called it. And I think some site selection people said, well, you should call it Southeastern Virginia or Coastal Virginia. But the bottom line was we couldn't come to a definitive answer. They started leaning toward Coastal Virginia. And then the decision was made that too many of the people who live here would just not buy into that. And I agree with that. And then they decided, well, let's just not rename it. Let's just brand it. And that's when they came up with the 757, which apparently goes back to a story when Frank Beamer was the Virginia Tech coach. And he said something about UNC is not going to come in and take our 757 recruits anymore. And then the young kids were already hashtag 757 on social media. So we said, okay, we'll brand it because the goal really is talent attraction and retention, and the young people drive that. And so let's just brand it as 757. And then promptly, less than a year later, we had a new area code. So some people still
I
use
still don't even know
757.
what that area code is.
I don't either. Zach, any
I
idea?
think it's 434.
That sounds right.
Is it?
But I don't know anybody that has that area code. I think it's mostly fax machines. So, yeah, so it's, if I could wave a magic wand, I don't even know what I would do. I think I would still call it Hampton Roads, and I would just tell the story better because it's unique, right? We have 17 different city, county, municipalities, and all have their unique gifts and assets and weaknesses also. But if we kind of tell the story of this is what Hampton Roads means, Hampton has nothing to do with highways and has nothing to do with the city of Hampton, and explain the history of it. 948 is the other area code?
That's the new one, 948.
That's got a ring to it.
Yeah, the 948. Hashtag 948. But we're actually engaged a small group of people that's becoming larger every day, engaged in other branding discussions and place-making discussions surrounding the water and the connections, the tunnels and the bridges. Mm-hmm. So more to follow on that one, but that's several regional leaders are involved in that conversation, and it for me, Howard Hagee, and I mentioned him before, the president of the Mariners Museum, has often said, and I think it's on the marketing material for the Mariners Museum, is that we're connected by history and by culture and by the water. And I think that our narrative as a region needs to kind of follow that general theme. Like we have this very rich history. We have these waterways. We have all this coastline. And that really is what connects us. It's not what divides us. And now that we have this Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel that's going to make the connection between the south side and the peninsula much easier. Hopefully people will be more willing to go back and forth. Although I did it for 5 years, it wasn't a big deal, but it will be less of an obstacle and more of a connection. So I think it's time to capitalize on that connection aspect. And since we're the connector, I can kind of tie it into the chamber too. So
Why is there so many chambers, Bob?
in Hampton Roads?
Yeah. Oh, well, even yeah, like a lot of early stage founders will ask me, like, what chamber should I be part of a chamber? What part should I be? Why are there so many? Is there an answer to that, or is it just everyone looking for their own tribe?
Yeah, that I think it has more to do with everyone's looking for their own tribe. So I think there's a need for chambers, right? We fill a need for especially and some of the chambers are fill different niches. So the York County Chamber is focused on obviously York County businesses. A lot of them are retail. A lot of them are located along 17. And it's kind of a community chamber, right? And I think they do a good job over there appealing to the businesses that they have there and advocating for those businesses. This Peninsula Chamber has been around for over 100 years and has probably in the past, and maybe even people say even now, focused on a lot of the big businesses and big industries around here. We're changing that a little bit. I think we've already been focused on smaller businesses too, but we're trying to change that narrative by actually offering some more programs for the smaller businesses. But I think chambers spring up because people see the need for a chamber, and whether it's a business development or economic development chamber or a social kind of a chamber or a small community chamber, the people, the businesses, the retailers see a need, and then it springs out of that need. So Williamsburg Chamber is focused, very closely on what's going on in Williamsburg, and Williamsburg is a community that has specific needs and specific focus areas. York County Chamber, I already mentioned, same thing. There's an Isle of Wight Chamber that's more focused on Smithfield and Isle of Wight, and then the Hampton Roads Chamber has a very large area, right, of businesses, and a lot of them are really big businesses. So we all do something different, and I think we all have our strengths and our weaknesses and different focus areas. So.
I've just always thought even if it was an additional membership charge, if there could be some reciprocity amongst the different chambers.
And we've discussed that, yeah.
Have you?
And we've also discussed potential mergers, right? I mean, we've talked to the Hampton Roads Chamber in the past about joining our two chambers, and I can tell you that the Peninsula business community was not in favor of that, and that may eventually happen anyway. But the Peninsula business community likes to have a presence here on the peninsula, and we fill that need. So I have talked to the York County Chamber about kind of subsuming them and merging together with them, and they're not interested right now, and that's fine. But we do want to collaborate closer with them, and we will with a new president coming in over there. We'll work, and he and I are meeting in December to discuss how we can collaborate closer. The Williamsburg Chamber is never going to merge with anybody because they have specific needs and specific focus. But Terry Benez, who's the president up there, and I are very close friends, and we always talk about collaborating more, and we do some collaboration. We probably need to do a little bit more, and that's actually part of our chamber's strategic plan is to collaborate more with regional chambers. So in the coming year or two, we're going to be looking at doing leadership events with them and public policy advocacy stuff more than we've done in the past. So, but as long as membership is strong, the chambers are all filling a need, and they're drawing members, and they're staying financially solvent, then there's no need to get rid of them or to merge.
Interesting.
Let's say that you're an Uber driver, or you have an Airbnb house, or you own a hotel, and people are coming into town, and they arrive and they go to the front desk. They ask you, the driver, and they say, "Hey, I'm here. I don't know what to do. Where should I go? What should I do? What's your answer? It doesn't have to be one thing. It could be a series of things. But what would you tell people to do in the region?
So this is just somebody coming in for like 5 days in the region, right?
Yeah.
Just to visit. Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing else on their agenda. So that's all part of, I think, Zach, I think you hit a good point here, because that's one of the ways that we can sell this area, right? Because you can come in and you can go from Williamsburg down to Virginia Beach and enjoy so many different things just in a 5-day period. So you can start historically, right? Start and hit the historic triangle, hit James, spend a half a day at Jamestown, spend half a day at the Yorktown, the American Revolution Museum and the battlefields, and then spend some time at Colonial Williamsburg, maybe at night, walk around and have dinner up there. The next day, you can, if you got kids, you can take them to Busch Gardens. And then you can work your way down the peninsula and see things like the Mariners Museum, which is designated by U.S. Congress as the United States National Maritime Museum. And then you can, drive a half mile or a mile down the road to the Virginia Living Museum and see that. And then the next day, if you want to stay on the history note, you can pop over to Fort Monroe and Point Comfort and see the landing place of the first African Americans, the first blacks to reach our shores many, many years ago. And then the next couple days spend down on the south side, and you can see, and you can go spend a day at the beach, and you can go to some of the parks down there in Virginia Beach, First Seashore National Park. You can take a boat ride around and take a look at the carriers at the world's largest Navy base. So there's so many things that you can do, or you can go see a concert down there, and you can come up here and see a concert at the Ferguson Center. There's so many great entertainment venues, recreational venues, sightseeing venues, history type sites, that there's so much to do in a 5-day period in Hampton Roads. I think that's our story, right? And it's not just for visitors and tourists. It's also part of the resident story. So when I lived, the first time I came to Hampton Roads, I was stationed at Little Creek, and I lived in Virginia Beach. I never came up to the peninsula except to go to Busch Gardens, right? So I wasn't aware of all the stuff that was going on in the peninsula. I think that story is true today also. There's still people who live on the south side who think that the peninsula is flyover country until you get to the Busch Gardens exit. So we need to share that same story with our residents and with the college students, right? The college students come in and they go to William and Mary, and they spend all their time in Williamsburg hitting the bars and the restaurants and going to classes. And then when they have time off, they go home, wherever the home is. But we need to reach out to them a little bit more and show them the great assets and the great gifts we have here and the opportunities. So I think you hit on a good point. That's part of our narrative, part of our storytelling, part of that connected by water history, and then we can expand that to recreation and entertainment and everything else.
Yeah, the Fort Monroe Casemate Museum is pretty cool. And then I've only done this once. I've driven by it many times, but I did it with Tim. Is the Nolan Trail is that at the
Right.
Mariners Museum?
It is. It's the Mariners Museum and Park, and that's the Nolan Trail is the park, and it's amazing.
That is the area's best kept secret.
Yeah, and we don't need to keep it a secret necessarily, but I kind of like going out and walking and not seeing 1,000 people. And I walk the trail all the time. So.
Yeah, it's great. It is. It is a treasure, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, so since we're on the topic of seeing things, doing things, experiencing things, generally we keep this question towards the end of the show. But if you were to name one food or drink item that is notorious to Hampton Roads, what would that be? Buffalo's got the chicken wings. We got New York pizza, Detroit style pizza. We got barbecue. Whatever the case is, for what makes Hampton Roads special?
Wow. Let's come back to that one. Because I'm gonna have to think about that for a little bit. I can tell you my favorite restaurants around here, but to nail down one food, and maybe I'm just the wrong person to do that. But what would you say, Tim? How about that?
So. And that question stumps everyone. And I think that Zach and I don't ask the questions. We're trying to stump anyone. We really want to understand what that is. I know one thing that I have grown to really appreciate that is unique to this area. I guess there's two things. There is the Orange Crush from a beverage standpoint, and like so when we go on vacation, like God, I would love an Orange Crush, but no one knows what that is outside of this area. And the other thing that family members request when we go back to see them is the white sauce from a Plaza Azteca, and then the other Mexican restaurants around the area. Those are the two things that we've kind of narrowed it down to.
So that's interesting because I was just eating at a local Mexican restaurant, and somebody told me that white sauce is kind of unique to this area. I had no idea. So,
Yeah.
Okay, that's my answer. The white sauce. I don't drink Orange Crushes, so can I tell you some of my favorite restaurants?
They're dangerous.
Yeah. I would love to hear what your.
So, have you been to Kismet?
Yes.
The 99 on Main Street in Hilton. That's kind of our go. Other than the Warwick Yacht Club, which is where we see you and Terry often, Tim. And I was there last night. The Kismet is our favorite place, but up in Williamsburg, the Fat Canary is a great place, and if you can,
the cheese shop is also a
cheese shop is a great place for a sandwich, and then the Amber Ox also is the best place for brunch, and then the Nest in Kiln Creek for brunch on Sunday is pretty good. So, but there's so many other good ones too. Vanguard, I'm a big fan of Vanguard. The Baker's Wife in Hampton. There's so many good, and I hate to list restaurants because now I'm leaving something out, and somebody's going to call me and say, "Hey, you forgot about."
Well, I think that we are. Surf Rider's really nice, and I do look forward to Fort Monroe when all of the renovations and redevelopment takes place there. I think that's going to really elevate Fort Monroe in ways that we didn't think that were even possible. But I will say that whenever we do leave this area, we are so spoiled from the craft beer scene. Like we have got a really, really great craft beer scene here, and it's super easy to take that for granted, and you don't really appreciate it until you leave the area.
We have a pretty good bourbon scene now too.
I'm not a bourbon guy, but what are some places from the bourbon?
The one I'd
standpoint?
like to mention is Ironclad down there by Newport News Shipbuilding.
Yeah.
So I would say 5 or 6 years ago, I had Ironclad, and I really didn't like it that much, but it's much better now. I just had some recently; it's very good. So and it's just a good location and a good place.
Yeah, that's there's that. There's Benny's right there, and there's
Is that at the end of the One City race?
Yeah.
Yeah. The coastal fermentory is there.
Yeah.
There's a Benny's there now?
Mm-hmm.
There's a Benny's, yeah.
Where did Benny's originate? Is it JMU?
Or there's UVA and Virginia Tech and JMU. There's the one that I went to.
Jack Brown's is originated at JMU, Tim?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question. But the Joe Bros were serving up drinks at College Game Day that Friday night there, and the place was a zoo.
Yeah. Did they say who they're playing in the bowl game yet?
No, it's that Sunday.
That won't come out for a couple of weeks, right?
No, Sunday.
Oh, is it? Okay.
No, I appreciate all the great things that you do in celebrating our region, Bob. There needs to be many, many more of you that are doing the same. I really.
So that Rising Tide series, we're going to focus on that, right? On telling people the good news that's going on, and not shying away from some of the bad news, right? The questions that we get from the crowd sometimes are, well, what's going to be done about public transit? And what do you think to address that?
What is the biggest or the growing need that you feel that you're hearing from the people you talk to that needs to be addressed?
Well, let me attack that from just a different kind of perspective, because I think Zach was talking earlier about like the kids, like we've been talking for 15 years about keeping the kids here and they still leave. So what do you hear from young people is like what's missing? And what I hear from them is public transit, right? So you go to DC and you jump on the metro, or you go to New York and you can ride public transit all day long in some of the big cities in the Northeast. But this area is just not conducive to that. It's kind of like Charleston, right? We're separated by so many bridges and tunnels. It's difficult to get around the whole region in public transit. But that's a complaint. So maybe we have to kind of figure that out somehow. I hear them talk about the entertainment offerings here, and the big concerts like I don't know, Taylor Swift or somebody like that doesn't come here. So you got to go to Charlottesville, or you got to go to DC. Right, Tay Sway, right? So that doesn't impact a 61-year-old guy who just wants to go to Ferguson Center and see Kenny Loggins, who's now old and gray. But that impacts the youth, the young people around here that we want to attract and retain. And then I hear things like, well, we need more murals. And that really baffles me, because I'm like, really, you're going to stay in an area because they have paintings on the side of a building? But that really is something that they want more of. And Asa Jackson, who is, is it Contemporary Arts Network,
Yep.
has been working on that. He's been on that soapbox for a long time, and he wants more public art. And I think he'll be successful in doing that, and maybe that will retain and attract some, because it gives a vibe. I guess it's more of a vibe than actual painting on the side of a building. And then they say stuff like food trucks. I'm like, okay, we got plenty of food trucks, but I think what they're really looking for is a culture that's conducive to things that the young people want to do. And so that's why you hear entertainment and how do you get around and food and drinks and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I would say that needs to improve here. And that all goes to, once again, the placemaking, the storytelling, the narrative, and the marketing of the region. So when all the tangible assets are there, then we just need to tell people about them, which we've been saying since the show began. And part of that is those things that I just mentioned. Now, the other thing that you'll hear from people is, well, public safety is a problem, right? And but public safety is an issue, and it's not necessarily a problem. It's an issue in every metropolitan area in the United States, right? And so once again, it's about telling your story. And Mark Talbot, who's the police chief in Norfolk and previously was in Hampton, came to our lead class one time, and he said, you hear about these stories and you read them in the daily press and you see them on Wavy or whatever. And he said, but most of the people in this room are unlikely to encounter that kind of stuff. And most people that are the victims of violent crime here know the person who committed the crime, right? So that's part of that narrative, but it's in the headlines of the newspaper every day. Yeah. And when a 6-year-old shoots his teacher, it's in international news and national news, and that impacts our area. So, but that's all about the narrative. It's all about telling the story. The public schools, and that one's public safety and public school related. That story. We need to have a better narrative about the public schools. And Academies of Hampton has done a wonderful job improving their schools and telling the story nationwide. So more of that in the area will help rise all boats, lift all boats. So Tim, I said mitigate weaknesses, right? Those are some of our weaknesses. We have to mitigate them, or we have to tell the story better, or we have to make them strengths.
Do you think we'll ever get a? And this is touchy, I know.
A professional sports team?
Well, no, we did talk about that, but I think that really the big thing beyond that is, will we ever get like a real airport that offers nonstop flights to places other than Charlotte, DC, and Atlanta? I mean, I think that, to me, that is the one thing that would bring everything together. It would bring businesses here because you could fly nonstop. You could bring sports teams. You could bring the entertainment. And I know that if I was to be able to wave a magic wand, it would be like, we have one big airport that, I don't know, put it in Isle of Wight or something, where there's land and it's not landlocked. And then to me, that would be a game changer. But it's tough.
So, I talked about those regional leadership visits earlier, and one of them was to Denver, right? And I'm going to tie in the professional sports team here too. But What does Denver have that this area doesn't have, other than 325 days of sunshine or whatever how they sell themselves, and the mountains and everything else? I mean, Denver's a wonderful city, but they have that big airport that they intentionally built within striking distance with public transportation from the airport into the center of the city. And they did that because they knew that it was going to help them grow economically. And they did it, quite a few years ago, but it has worked. But what else does Denver have? They have 4 or 5 professional sports teams. So we're never going to have that. And the airport, maybe that's something in the future down in the Suffolk area, somewhere down south. But in the meantime, we have Richmond, which is a pretty good little airport, right? Which is, Tim, you can get in your Tesla and not even drive and be there in an hour and 10 minutes. Newport News, I flew out of there the other day to Texas, and you're right, it only goes to Charlotte. But Charlotte's a pretty good hub where you can get everywhere else. And Norfolk, does Norfolk only fly to a few different places nonstop? Atlanta,
Norfolk is our go-to typically.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, the last few times we've tried to fly out of Newport News, they changed our ticket and rerouted us to fly out of Norfolk anyway. Oh. So it's just it's been.
So about the study that's going on right now, and I know everybody who's been around here for a while, they hear about a study and they go, "That's just another study." But I think this one is focused on real solutions, right? They're going to look at all the regional airports, which includes some smaller ones, obviously, than Newport News, Williamsburg, and the Norfolk Airport and the Richmond Airport, and then look at what's the best utilization or the best usage of each one of those airports. And so maintenance, logistics, commercial, private, all the different possibilities that an airport can be used for. And then they're going to recommend, I think what each airport can be used for. And when I look at Newport News Williamsburg Airport, I look at the location, and the facility is a very good location. The runway's long. It's kind of in that corridor, and Tim, and I think maybe you and I have talked about this before, between Jefferson Lab and NASA. You've got Ferguson, which is a Fortune 500 company right here. You got Newport News Shipbuilding, which is definitely Fortune 500. So there's a lot of business travel. There's the military here. They really can capitalize on that airport and make it important, and capitalize on the fact that it is a good facility and it is located right on the center of the peninsula. I can be there from my house in 10 minutes. And then from the parking lot to the gate in another 7 or 8, because it's a very convenient airport. But they need more than American Airlines flying 5 flights a day to Charlotte. But potentially they can use that for something having to do with NASA or logistics. So they're looking at all possibilities. I think this study will be beneficial and be valuable to the region, and then we'll see what comes out of it. I'm cynical, not cynical. I don't think that a big airport is in our near future, right? Even in the next 20 years.
If we can't agree on a name, we certainly can't agree
a dream like that. It's probably way too expensive, and there's way too many people who would have to come together in a regionalism kind of way and decide that that's what's going to be.
You would.
And it seems to be a fifth rail or is it a fifth rail or third rail? What's the proper third rail? It seems to be a rail that people do not want to touch.
Right. I mean, to your point, you mentioned Denver, but Charlotte was the same way, and Atlanta was the same way, and
Dallas, Charlotte, and here we're battling for U.S. Air. And we couldn't, the story goes, we couldn't agree as to where to put it, like in the middle of nowhere, which is where historically most airports are, in the middle of nowhere. They're not in the city center.
Yeah.
But
except like National, right? National's right there downtown. But I remember growing up.
That's because there's not a lot of tall buildings there, because buildings can't be tall there.
That's right. But I lived in McLean, Virginia for a little while when I was growing up. And I remember my father used to fly out of Dulles all the time on business. And back then, Dulles was in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there was nothing. You got on that road, that expressway to go out to Dulles, you saw nothing for 10, 15 minutes until you got to the airport. And now you drive there and you go, oh my gosh.
What is it, 66 you have to drive?
Too.
Yeah.
What's that?
60, just taking 66 to get to that expressway or whatever to get into the airport. Yeah, it's wild.
You can thank Steve Case for making that a big mess by moving AOL right there. That's the big thing. But yeah, I mean, look, airports are historically outside of a city, 20 miles out. That's what happens. But
and I'm seeing it in Jacksonville, Florida now. They built the same thing. It's way out, and now everything is just moving out to the airport. So.
Yeah, sprawl. What's something we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
Ask that again.
What is something that you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I think we've talked about just about everything.
Well, yeah, one thing that we haven't talked about that you got a new location. Tell everybody about the new location.
So, so we were in Hampton for many years, right? 17 at the last location in Hampton, and it was a great facility that we were in. We had a good building, we had good space, we had a big parking lot, which is important to a chamber. But it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere. So I jokingly say that a city leader that will remain unnamed, all 3 times that this city leader came to the chamber while I was there in 5 years, they got lost. And you should never get lost going to the chamber. And nobody should ever meet me out in town and say, so where is the Chamber of Commerce? So we wanted to be in a more central location. And so we looked around, we looked in areas in Hampton, because we love the city of Hampton, of course. We looked at Newport News, which is home to the highest percentage of our members at the Peninsula Chamber. We looked a little bit in York County. We looked at one building in York County. But we settled on City Center because it's the hub, really, right? It's right in the center. There's entertainment here. There's restaurants here. There's big business here. And it's easy access to 64. And to Jefferson, obviously, we're right down the street from Jefferson. And we had a street side location with a sign over the door, and people can walk in and say, "Hey, I just started a new business, and I saw the chamber here, so I wanted to come and get a membership package." So it's just a great location, and it's also 10 minutes from my house, which is wonderful. Although the past one was only 17 minutes from my house, so it wasn't a big commute. But the other thing I like about it is I'll go out, I'll be sitting at my desk sometimes, and I'm just making phone calls, and it's a nice day, and I walk out and I walk around the fountain 2 or 3 times and sit on a bench and just have conversations and catch up with people. And while I'm doing that, I walk into Mayor Jones or Senator Monty Mason, which I did not too long ago, just walking around, or I run into somebody from Langley Federal or somebody from Riverside or somebody from Ferguson, and it's a convenient location, and it's convenient for people to get to, and it's convenient for me to get to people, and my staff likes the safety and security and the restaurants that are nearby. So it's just a net big plus.
Yeah, I agree. It is really nice to be at your new location and look out the windows and see foot traffic. I mean, that is just something that there's not a lot of places that offer foot traffic, and really, Zach, reminds me of being down in Hatch back in the day with all the foot traffic going around Granby. It's really it's awesome, and you've got a great staff, and
growing staff too. So.
Well, I appreciate how lean and nimble and mighty you all are. You put on a ton of events. You provide a lot of value, and I appreciate the 5 C's and all that you're doing for the region.
So I didn't mention the 6th C. If we do the 5 C's right, so the 6th C is that we're a catalyst for economic growth. If we do those other 5 C's correctly. Right, and that's in our mission statement now, that to be a catalyst for economic growth. But can I just talk? I did realize something I didn't talk about.
Yeah.
Do I have another minute or so? So we just finished a strategic plan. So the board of directors, my executive committee, we sat down and we had probably 10 to 12 meetings, and we put together a strategic plan which will drive our direction for the next couple of years. And the 3 main pillars. So the 3 main lines of effort, I guess is a good way to put it, are leadership development, and we have the LEAD program, and we're developing some other leadership programs. Regional collaboration, and notice I didn't say regionalism. It's more focused on collaboration, and that is being a representative to regional initiatives. And then the third one is advocacy, and advocacy comes in many shapes and forms, and most people think public policy advocacy. So we are going to take a greater involvement in public policy advocacy, advocating for our businesses in the region. But advocacy also means instruction and networking and marketing and all those other things that the chamber traditionally does for businesses that are members of the chamber. So I'm excited about the new strategic plan. It's going to drive, like I said, it's going to drive our direction, our actions. It's going to help us determine exactly what resources we need to accomplish the objectives, and like a strategic plan does. But we're going to unveil it at our annual meeting, which is on December 12th. So, and then we have a new chairman coming in. We have several new board members coming on. So every time I think, boy, I've been at this job for 5 or 6 years now, maybe I should start looking for something else, I get excited because there's exciting things going on, like the Jefferson Lab announcement. But so much good stuff going on the peninsula. We're happy to be right in the middle of all of it and helping to drive some of it and drive that constant improvement.
Well, I appreciate talking about all the great things, and we touched on some things that need to be addressed. And so in that case, you have some job security for you for a little while. You got some things to address, possibly solve. But
I just have to not step on my tongue or something.
Well, I
have to watch. Sometimes I have to watch what I say, but I don't say anything very.
No, and and someone's got to say it. So I appreciate your candor as well. So otherwise we're just going to continue marching to the same beat of the same drum, and nothing's going to change. So, and as we know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, I appreciate you. And
likewise. That's good.
Thanks for being here. Cheers.
Thanks, Zach.